my mom was born in Brooklyn, and then she ended up living in Long Beach with my grand with her whole family. I think they all moved from Brooklyn as a family. I'm not sure when, but they moved there they lived there, I think, until they all married off. I think 1948 or 49, maybe 1949. Well, what happened is my mom and dad left Smith there. They left Smith there, and then my mom got pregnant with Bruce, and head-on collision with some woman that I believe stayed from a mental institution. She was driving on the wrong side of the road. They had a head-on collision that my mom unfortunately got the worst of it. I think she pretty much went right through one of those metal dashboards and knocked all her front teeth out and pretty much hit the windshield to her face and was pretty messed up. So I do remember my dad saying how mad my mom was. While they were waiting for the police to come, she was writing down the license number of the car. She was so business-minded and efficient. She was furious, too. I remember that, my dad saying that, how she was steaming mad, writing down the license number, the make of the car, and all these little details that she could remember about the accident. So when they went to court, she had something to say. But I know that when she had Bruce, that was they were going to trying to get Smith back with the family kind of thing, but because of the accident, they left Smith with the grandma and the rest of the family and the four sisters in Long Beach. And then they proceeded to have Bruce and Keith. And I think somewhere in those days, my understanding of it is that my dad was already the promoter of Edmonton. He bought the license. He owned the part ownership in the license for Edmonton. I think going back to even 1936 or something like that, before the war. He had a piece of it, and he was running. He was involved in wrestling shows before the war, and then a little bit during the war. And then when the war came, he joined the Navy with I think a bunch of his buddies that were football players. Because my dad played with the 1937-38 and then the 38-39 Edmonton Eskimos, which was back then they were called the Edmonton Eskies. And he went down, I think it was to Halifax or Dartmouth. He was stationed there, were in the Navy. But I think my dad, as I remember it, got set up with a pretty cozy job where he was one of the head chefs in the kitchen, which is where my dad learned to cook. And it also allowed him to get choice pieces of meat and be able to take advantage of the kitchen opportunities, which allowed him to keep his weight up and get big and strong. And I think my dad had wrestling demonstrations. I don't know what those would be, but I think they were like shoot matches or just wrestling matches maybe on the Navy, on the boat, and as entertainment for the troops back in the night. And somewhere in there, I believe my dad, probably in 1948, or even more than that, I think it was probably 1946. My dad got his leave from the Navy and was about to be released from his obligations to the Navy and decided to take leave. And I think he just wanted to go down to New York City and see New York City while he could, because he might never get back to see it. I guess being young, and also never get back to New York. He went down there, and he was just taking in different sites and walking around, and he happened to wanted to take a look at Babe Ruth's diner or restaurant that he had. Well, actually, not Babe Ruth's, Jack Dempsey. Jack Dempsey had a sort of a famous sports restaurant or something right in Manhattan, I believe. My dad walked in and was taking a look around, and he was walking up. Jack Dempsey was sitting at a booth with Toots Mondt, the world famous, at that time, New York, Madison Square Garden wrestling promoter that was like a gangster. And he met him, and as soon as my dad walked past him, he goes, "Where'd you get the big neck, kid?" My dad had as big as his thighs. He said, "I've been training up in Canada with a guy named Jack Taylor." Jack Taylor may very well have been the toughest man on the planet in his earlier days, and was a feared shooter of the highest magnitude. I don't know anybody that take. I think my dad would always told me that Jack Taylor was the toughest guy there ever was. And so when he found out that it was Jack Taylor that taught my dad, he knew all about Jack Taylor. Toots Mondt did. He says, "Kid, when you get out of the Navy, which was another 2 weeks or something like that, because you come down and see me, and I'll give you a job as a pro wrestler." So I may have the dates and times a little bit off, but I know that my dad, as soon as he got leave from the Navy, which was shortly after that, he went back down to New York and started wrestling as a full-time professional wrestler for Toots Mondt. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm surprised Ross doesn't know all these things more than I do, but I think my dad and the wrestlers, there was a guy named Dan Blears who later on became the promoter of Hawaii, and Sandor Kovacs, who later on became the promoter of Vancouver. But they all end up getting jobs as part-time jobs as lifeguards in Long Beach. And my mom and some of her sisters were the beach beauty queens that won beauty contests or something. And I think somewhere through that, my dad met my mom on the beach in Long Island, and they fell in love. And I think my understanding is Terry, my mom's father, loved my dad. He just thought he was the greatest thing, and loved him, and really, really was close to my dad. Whereas my mom's mom couldn't stand my dad. He wasn't a doctor, he wasn't educated, something like that, but a little too rough around the edges for my mom. But my mom fell in love with my dad, and they eventually got married, and a bunch of wrestlers at the wedding. I know Arnold Skolin was one of the best men at my dad's wedding. He was another guy who used to tell me stories about my dad. But then my dad went back up to when he wrestled in New York, I think, still about 1940, like for 2 years on the circuits right around New York and Atlantic City and Philadelphia and all those kinds of things. He did pretty well for himself. I think he made pretty good money, and took that money back with him all the way up to Canada, to Montana. And then from Montana, he, like I said, he started making those long drives up to Edmonton, which was his town. He owned it before the war. I think he left it in the hands of a friend of his named Al Olney. They were partners and bought into the promotion, or bought the promotion when they were teenagers, or very young. I don't think they had aspirations of making my dad the star wrestler of the company, and they would run it together. But is what they had in mind, and I think Al Olney, his partner, did that for a while. But after a while, he had bigger fish to fry, and wanted to work with animals and wildlife and whatnot. He kind of he let my dad buy him out, and my dad continued to run Edmonton. And back then, when he was in Montana, staying there before the accident, and maybe after the accident, they would drive to Spokane, and they would drive to, I think, even as far as Salt Lake City, and they'd drive to Fargo and different places that were closer to Montana. But the one long trip that they did all the time was all the way up to Edmonton. They'd drive all the way up to Edmonton and show up in Edmonton. And I think that Edmonton was coming along, and it was a pretty good town. Except in that story, my dad was driving back to Montana from Edmonton. He stopped in Calgary. He wanted to check on some house that he found out was for sale. That's for sale, the Hart house that he bought. He bought the house, I think, and I know the story there is that he told the guy, I'll buy the house if you throw in the cat. And the guy said, the cat's yours. Stu moved in. He went to, I think they lived in a house trailer in Montana, probably, I think, until 1949. Maybe even 1951, I think, is when they got the promotion to Calgary. my dad bought the promotion from the guys that owned it. And the promoters that ran Calgary, this is just, I might be wrong on the facts of it, but as I understood it from my dad talking to him years ago, the guys that owned Calgary, I can't remember the name now offhand, but they owned a huge portion of the promotion that they owned, including Calgary, was so big and so large. It included Vancouver, included Winnipeg, included, like now he owned Edmonton. It owned a huge swath of Western Canada and upper West United States. I think it's even Montana, and I know my dad told me once that he owned it. He had the rights to Salt Lake City. The problem is he couldn't manage them all. They were too far off. It was too hard to make them all work. So over the years, he downsized to just Calgary and it was abandoned Winnipeg and Vancouver. And, I think Sandor Kovacs opened up Vancouver. And later on, Vern Johnny and the guy that he was, I can't remember his name, but the guy that he partnered with him, long-time promoter, they opened up Winnipeg through Minneapolis, and the time my dad lost the rights to them, that's what he always told me. Anyway, so that's the story I know about my dad. But as far as my mom's family, I was just in the beach, and I took a picture of my grandma's house, or my mom's house that she grew up in. I just send that. Sold, and when I went there was nobody there, and I never went inside, but I just took a picture of it. You know, when my mom had her accident in Montana, they ended up leaving Smith in Long Beach for much longer than they anticipated, and they even had one more son out. They had Bruce, and then they had Keith, and they had the third son. They decided that they wanted Smith back, and by this time, my grandma, my mom's mom, had become quite, she never had a boy. She had 5 daughters, so she became quite, I don't know if she was just losing her mind or kind of crazy, but she would not send Smith back, but she wanted to keep him. And my understanding was that, without anyone really knowing, my grandma had spoiled Smith rotten. I remember my dad telling me that they all thought it was so cute when Smith would push his whole dish of cereal off the high chair and just watch it smash on the floor and all that. Clean it up and give him another bowl, and he'd do it again. And you know, he was disciplined in any kind of way, and was kind of the king of the castle as far as maybe a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. He might even have been as old as 5. But I know Wayne wasn't born yet, the 4th son. They kept trying to get, I don't know how they wanted him to, they were supposed to get him from Long Beach to Montana. But I know that my dad got frustrated and jumped in his car and just drove like straight with no sleep or anything, just drove all the way to Manhattan and Long Beach and pulled up to the house and walked in the house and pretty much walked out of the house with Smith and maybe a handful of diapers. And Smith was in for a huge shock. I know my mom's sister, my Aunt Diana, told me that she thinks that's why Smith was so problematic as a kid and confused maybe. And he was not used to my dad's firm kind of discipline. He was only a little kid, but I think my dad probably had the best intentions, but sometimes could be a little gruff with his kids. And I think Smith was maybe Smith's crazy personality was more a little bit on my dad. Picked up call that those days were over. That's about everything I know about all that. I was always kind of, for a long time it was impossible because I was always someone driving or someone else driving me there. Of course, I didn't know where to go or look for my parents' addresses. It was more like, for me, I was kind of forced to go to the building, wrestle, and drive back to the hotel, which was in Newark most of during those days. But I never saw much of anything to do with my mom. I think I probably called my mom once. Probably after I've been there for 10 years or something, probably in the 90s or something like that. And I had a wrestling fan drive me to the house, and I remember looking at it and just taking a picture of it or something. But I don't have that picture anymore. And then a few weeks ago when I was in New York, and I was at a baseball game. We did a bunch of things there. And then when I was there, I got someone. I called my aunt, who's still alive, the youngest of the Hart daughters. And she gave me the address of the house, and somebody took me over. It was only a few minutes from where I was staying. And they let me. I just jumped out and took some pictures of the house. And the address of one of those pictures. I think I did get to see them in Calgary, I think, live. My wife was a big fan now. I'm not 100% sure. You may say, they never even played Calgary or something. But I thought I saw them with her in Calgary. Quite a few years ago. Oh, most of the stuff in there is either stuff that fans gave me or stuff that I collected on my own. Like when my mom had passed, they left me all the wrestling belts. And they left me, that would be about all they left me, other than money. But they left me all of my dad's old tag belts, and and that's the things I got in my bar, just things I built up over the years and put away. And kind of, a lot of times people give you stuff and you just don't have the heart to throw it away. You got 100 of them downstairs, some of them are really detailed artwork. Anyways, I have trouble throwing anything away that somebody spent a long time. So I still got a lot of fan letters and all kinds of things that I know my wife's going to kill me one of these days. I don't burial places. No, I don't really have anything, that I can say that is worth mentioning. I'm mostly kind of laid back and kind of relaxing these days. Trying to cut down my appearances and stay home a little more. But I do plan on doing a second book. And I'm saying that for about 20 years. So don't hold your breath. It'll be different than my other books in the sense that my other book took me 7 years to write it. I think I could write a follow-up to my first book and write it in a different way and have a different point of view. And I'd also like to do a coffee table book, all my drawings and characters of different wrestlers and things like that. It'd be a really interesting book that I never thought about. I thought about naming it using the same title I used in my first book. The real life of the real cartoon life of pro wrestling.